The shimmering walls of the observation deck curved around Dr. Mara Klein as she stood motionless, eyes fixed on the holographic display. 3 months at the Vespera Orbital Research Facility had taught her patience, a virtue the other xenolinguists seemed to lack as they paced behind her, their varied anatomies betraying universal signs of frustration. "Another failure," hissed Ambassador Sophie, their gaseous form rippling with agitation inside their containment suit. "The 61st attempt. Perhaps we should reconsider the value of including primitive species in this endeavor." Mara didn't turn. She knew primitive species meant humans. In the grand hierarchy of the Dominion, an interstellar confederation spanning 17 systems, humanity ranked embarrassingly low on the linguistic complexity scale. Their inclusion in the Vespera project had been controversial from the start. "The Dusk Stalker refuses every established protocol," said Commander Yalor, their crystalline form refracting light in patterns that signaled deep concern. "The creature understands us. It simply chooses not to respond." Beyond the observation windows, the containment sphere housed the most feared predator on Vespera 4, 6 meters long, with iridescent scales that shifted from obsidian to deep violet. The Dusk Stalker resembled an enormous felid crossed with something reptilian. 6 eyes, arranged in a cluster on its broad skull, surveyed the room with unsettling intelligence, its massive paws, each equipped with retractable claws that could slice through carbon fiber restraints, rested beneath its powerful body as it lounged on a simulated forest floor. 60 linguists from across the Dominion had attempted communication. 60 had failed. "I believe," said Station Director Thelius, their voice resonating from membranes along their segmented exoskeleton, "it is time for unorthodox measures." A hush fell over the assembled specialists. "Dr. Klein," continued Thelius, mandibles clicking in what Mara had learned was amusement, "your application to this station included certain questionable methodologies. The committee found them charming, if scientifically dubious." Mara turned from the display, facing the collection of beings who represented the pinnacle of interstellar linguistic achievement. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. "My methodologies prioritize presence over performance," she said quietly. "I observe before I impose." "How delightfully primitive," whispered someone in the back, a Cereoid linguist whose name Mara couldn't recall. Thelius's compound eyes fixed on Mara. "Since conventional approaches have failed, you will be permitted to attempt contact with the specimen. You have 1 standard cycle. Your performance will be noted in humanity's evaluation for continued participation in Dominion research initiatives. Daka." Mara nodded once, ignoring the murmurs that rippled through the assembly. No pressure, then just the future of her species' intellectual standing. "I'll need unrestricted access to the containment chamber," she said. Dr. Rivar, the station's Cereoid xenobiologist, floated forward, their gelatinous form pulsing with alarm. "Absolutely not. The Dusk Stalker has eviscerated 3 security drones. Its behavioral algorithms suggest a 93% probability of aggressive response to direct contact." "Then I accept that 7% chance of non-aggression," Mara replied. "You misunderstand," Rivar continued, their translucent body flushing crimson. "Those were the odds when the specimen was first captured. After 3 months of failed communication attempts, its aggression markers have escalated. Current projections suggest—" "I need to enter its space as an equal," Mara interrupted. "No barriers, no weapons, no technology." The observation deck erupted in a cacophony of protests, each species registering alarm in their unique way. Commander Yalor's crystalline form vibrated at a frequency that made nearby instruments malfunction. Ambassador Soph compressed their gaseous body into a dense knot of disbelief. "Suicide," declared Rivar flatly. Director Thelius raised 2 of their 4 upper limbs. silencing the chaos. Your request is granted. Dr. Klein, the Dominion values diversity of approach, even when such approaches contradict established wisdom. Their mandibles clicked again, that unsettling amusement. The observation will commence at the beginning of the next cycle. I suggest you prepare yourself accordingly. As the assembly dispersed, Mara caught whispered wagers on her survival time. The kindest bet gave her 30 seconds. Back in her quarters, Mara reviewed everything known about the Dusk Stalker. The creature was undoubtedly intelligent. Brain scans revealed neural complexity rivaling that of the most advanced Dominion species. Yet, it had refused to engage with any communication technology, from basic symbol systems to the most sophisticated psychic resonance chambers. "Computer," she said to the room's AI, "display all footage of the Dusk Stalker's interactions with station personnel." For hours, she watched, while other linguists had focused on the creature's lack of response to their prompts. Mara noticed something different: micro-expressions, subtle shifts in posture. The way its 6 eyes tracked each visitor's movements with varying degrees of attention. It wasn't that the stalker couldn't communicate. It was evaluating its would-be communicators and finding them wanting. The morning of her attempt, Mara dressed simply in the standard station jumpsuit. She declined the protective gear Rivar insisted she wear and refused the emergency translator implant. Commander Yalor tried to press into her palm. "You are representing humanity," Yalor reminded her, their crystalline surface reflecting Mara's face in fractured patterns. "Your failure will reflect on your entire species. So will my success," Mara replied. The containment chamber's antechamber was crowded with observers when she arrived. Specialists from 17 worlds watched from behind protective barriers as Thelius reviewed the safety protocols Mara had specifically requested be suspended. "The chamber will be unsealed for precisely 90 seconds, the director explained. "During that time, you may enter the specimen's habitat. We cannot guarantee your extraction if complications arise." "Understood," Mara said. Dr. Rivar hovered nearby, their gelatinous form undulating with anxiety. "I've prepared a sedative protocol if the specimen shows aggression. 1 pulse from the ceiling emitters will—" "No interventions," Mara interrupted firmly, "no matter what happens." Ambassador Soph's containment suit drifted closer. "You realize the creature likely considers you prey. Your species bears remarkable anatomical similarities to its natural food sources on Vespera 4. Perhaps that will give us something to discuss," Mara replied with a smile that wasn't returned. The observation deck fell silent as Director Thelius initiated the chamber access sequence. A seam appeared in the curved wall, widening into an aperture large enough for Mara to step through. Beyond lay the simulated Vesperan forest, dark, humid, filled with unfamiliar foliage. Mara took a deep breath and crossed the threshold. The atmosphere inside was thick with unfamiliar scents, rich soil, alien vegetation, and something muskier that likely belonged to the chamber's occupant. The lighting mimicked Vespera's red dwarf star, casting everything in a crimson glow that made depth perception challenging. Mara remained perfectly still just inside the entrance, allowing her eyes to adjust. She heard the Dusk Stalker before she saw it, a low, rhythmic sound somewhere between breathing and purring emanating from a dense cluster of vegetation to her left. Slowly, deliberately, Mara turned her head toward the sound. 6 eyes gleamed in the shadows, watching her with predatory intensity. Behind her, through the still open entrance, she could hear the frantic whispers of the observing scientists. Someone was counting down her remaining time. 65 seconds, 64, 63. Mara ignored them. She kept her gaze steady, meeting the stalker's multiple eyes without flinching. Then, carefully, she lowered her own eyes and turned her head slightly to expose her neck, a universal gesture of vulnerability among predator species. The whispers behind her ceased abruptly. She could almost feel the shock radiating from the observation deck. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then came a rustling from the vegetation, and the dusk stalker emerged fully into view. Its massive form moved with liquid grace despite its bulk. Each step precisely placed, its scales shifted color as it moved, adapting to the changing light patterns. An evolutionary advantage that had made it the apex predator on a world full of deadly competitors. It circled Mara once, its 6 eyes never leaving her. The powerful muscles beneath its scales rippled with each movement. One swipe of those front paws could separate Mara's head from her shoulders. One bite from its double-hinged jaw could snap her spine. 29 seconds remaining. The stalker completed its circle and stopped directly before Mara, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from its body. It was larger than she'd realized from the observation window. Its head alone was nearly the size of her torso. Its breath, surprisingly sweet with hints of the fruit-bearing plants in its enclosure, washed over her face. Mara remained still, her eyes lowered, her breathing steady despite the hammering of her heart. 15 seconds. The whispers had resumed behind her, a mixture of fascination and horror. She heard Riva urging Director Thelius to activate the sedation protocol. Heard Thelius refusing, honoring Mara's request for non-intervention. 10 seconds. The dusk stalker exhaled, a long, deliberate breath that ruffled Mara's hair. Then, to the astonishment of everyone watching, it slowly, majestically lowered its massive head. Its muzzle touched the floor at Mara's feet, and there it remained, perfectly still, in a posture of complete submission. Time seemed to freeze on the observation deck. The countdown faltered and stopped. 5 seconds passed. 10. The stalker remained motionless at Mara's feet, its 6 eyes half-lidded but still watching her. With infinite care, Mara extended her hand, palm down, and held it before the creature's muzzle. The stalker's nostrils flared, taking in her scent. Then, in a movement so gentle it seemed impossible from such a powerful predator, it lifted its head just enough to press against her palm. A collective gasp erupted from the observation deck. Through the still-open entrance, Mara could see monitors lighting up with data. The stalker's biochemical readings were showing patterns never before recorded. Some kind of resonance that the station's instruments could barely detect. "It's communicating," whispered Riva, their gelatinous form rippling with disbelief. "But not in any format we've catalogued." Mara knew better. The stalker wasn't communicating, not in the way the Dominion understood the concept. It was connecting, recognizing another being's autonomy and responding to respect with respect. She turned her hand, offering her palm upward. The stalker pressed its muzzle into her hand, and a vibration passed through its powerful body, something like a purr, but deeper, more complex. The monitoring equipment on the observation deck went haywire, unable to process the unfamiliar patterns. "Impossible," said Commander Yalor, their crystalline form vibrating with shock. "The specimen has never, Perhaps," said Mara quietly, not taking her eyes from the stalker. "You've been trying too hard to make it speak your language." For the next hour, well beyond the 90 seconds originally allotted, Mara remained in the chamber with the dusk stalker. She made no attempt to impose symbols or sounds upon it. Instead, she sat cross-legged on the forest floor, and after a moment's consideration, the massive predator curled its body around her in a protective circle. On the observation deck, theories multiplied. Some suggested the stalker was preparing for a delayed attack. Others proposed it was merely curious about this new approach. Dr. Riva, after analyzing the creature's biochemical readings, was the first to propose what seemed absurd. The apex predator of Vespera 4 had recognized Mara as a kindred intelligence and was offering its protection. When Mara finally emerged from the chamber, She was met with a barrage of questions. Instruments were thrust toward her. Translation matrices hummed as specialists from 17 worlds demanded explanations. "What did it communicate?" demanded Ambassador Soph. "How did you establish the connection?" asked Commander Yalor. "What is the creature's linguistic framework?" pressed another linguist. Mara looked at them each in turn, then said simply, "It didn't want to be a specimen. It wanted to be seen." The Xenolinguistic Council convened an emergency session that lasted 3 full cycles. Debates raged about the definition of language, the parameters of intelligence, and the validity of Mara's methodology, if one could even call it that. Some dismissed the encounter as meaningless. Others insisted it represented a breakthrough. Through it all, Mara continued her daily visits to the Stalker's chamber. No instruments, no translation devices, no protective barriers, just presence, attention, and respect. On the 7th day, Director Thelius summoned Mara to the administration level. The director's office was designed to accommodate their arachnoid physiology. 8 workstations arranged in a circle, allowing them to multitask with remarkable efficiency. When Mara entered, Thelius was simultaneously reviewing research proposals, adjusting environmental controls, and monitoring security feeds from across the station. "Dr. Klein," they said, mandibles clicking in that now familiar expression of amusement. "The Council has reached a decision regarding your unconventional approach to the Dusk Stalker." Mara steeled herself. Despite her apparent success, she had violated virtually every protocol in the Dominion's contact handbook. Expulsion from the project seemed likely, possibly even revocation of humanity's research privileges. "Your technique lacks reproducible methodology." Thelius continued, "It cannot be quantified, standardized, or taught to others through conventional means. It defies the fundamental principles of Dominion xenolinguistics." "I understand," Mara said quietly. "And yet," Thelius's compound eyes gleamed, "results cannot be denied. The specimen," they paused, mandibles clicking rapidly. "The individual has demonstrated unprecedented levels of engagement. Its stress markers have decreased by 78%. It displays anticipatory behavior before your visits." Mara waited, unsure where this was leading. "The Council has voted to establish a new division," Thelius announced. "Non-technological empathic resonance. You will head this division with a mandate to document your approach for potential application to other contact scenarios." Stunned, Mara could only nod. "Additionally," Thelius continued, "humanity's ranking on the linguistic complexity scale has been provisionally adjusted. Your species appears to possess certain intuitive capabilities that our measurements have failed to capture." Later that day, as Mara walked the curving corridor toward the containment chamber, though containment no longer seemed the right word, she passed groups of specialists from across the Dominion. Instead of dismissive whispers, she received curious glances. A few even nodded in acknowledgement. At the chamber entrance, Dr. Rivar waited, their gelatinous form pulsing with what Mara had learned to recognize as excitement. "I've been reviewing the biochemical data," they said without preamble. "The resonance pattern when the stalker interacts with you, it's similar to bonds observed in pack species across 17 different biospheres. Not quite familial, not quite social. Something more fundamental. Recognition," Mara suggested. Rivar's form rippled in agreement. "We've been approaching Vesperan wildlife through our own cultural lenses. The stalker doesn't communicate to exchange information. It communicates to establish presence, to acknowledge the other. Not so different from us." Then, Mara said with a smile, the chamber door slid open, revealing the now familiar crimson-tinged forest. As Mara stepped through, a shadow detached itself from the vegetation, 6 eyes gleaming, scales shifting from deep violet to a shade that almost matched the blue of Mara's jumpsuit. The Dusk Stalker approached, its massive head already lowering in greeting. But this time, Instead of stopping at Mara's feet, it gently pressed its muzzle against her hand, then turned and walked a few paces toward the center of the chamber. There it paused, looking back at her expectantly. An invitation. Mara followed the creature deeper into its domain, aware of the watching eyes from the observation deck, aware of the implications for future contact protocols. But in that moment, she focused only on the being before her, not specimen, not subject, but fellow traveler in the vast, complex web of consciousness that stretched across the stars. The next day, to the astonishment of the entire station, the security field at the chamber entrance was deactivated. The door was programmed to recognize both Mara and the stalker. Together, they emerged into the main corridor of the xenobiological wing, causing a momentary panic until staff realized the massive predator was walking calmly at Mara's side, its 6 eyes taking in the unfamiliar surroundings with alert curiosity rather than aggression. Word spread quickly. Specialists lined the corridor, pressing against walls to maintain distance as the unlikely pair passed. The stalker ignored them all, its attention fixed solely on Mara, matching its pace to hers with careful precision. They walked the full circuit of the observation level, a victory lap of sorts, though Mara would never have called it that. The Dominion's greatest linguists watched in stunned silence as human and predator moved in perfect synchrony. No words exchanged, no technology mediating their connection. Commander Yalor found them later in the station's arboretum, where the stalker was investigating the collection of plants from across the galaxy with evident fascination. "The Council is rewriting first contact protocols," Yalor said without preamble, their crystalline form shimmering with complex emotions. "Your approach will be incorporated into standard training for all Dominion contact specialists." Mara nodded, watching as the stalker delicately sniffed a flowering vine from Proxima Centauri. "I must ask," Yalor continued, lowering their voice despite the absence of others in the arboretum. "How did you know it would respond to you? What made you certain it wouldn't attack?" Mara considered the question. The truth was, she hadn't been certain. She had acted on intuition, on the patterns she'd observed in the stalker's behavior during those 60 failed attempts. But there was something more, something she'd recognized in those 6 watchful eyes. "It was lonely," she said simply. "All those brilliant communication attempts, all that technology, and not once did anyone just see it, acknowledge it as a being rather than a puzzle to solve." Yalor was silent for a long moment, their crystalline surface refracting light in patterns that suggested deep thought. "Perhaps," they finally said, "we have been measuring intelligence by our ability to impose our understanding upon others, rather than our capacity to recognize understanding different from our own." "Perhaps," Mara agreed. The stalker returned to them, having completed its inspection of the Arboretum's offerings. It settled beside Mara, its massive body radiating heat in the climate-controlled environment. One of its 6 eyes remained fixed on Commander Yalor, not with hostility, but with the same evaluating intelligence Mara had first noticed in the observation footage. "Does it have a name?" Yalor asked hesitantly. Mara smiled. "Names are our construct, not its, but in its native ecosystem. Its kind are known by a scent mark that roughly translates to shadow who walks between dusk and dawn." "Appropriate," Yalor commented. "And what does it call you?" Mara placed her hand gently on the stalker's scales, feeling the now familiar vibration that ran through its powerful body whenever they touched. "It doesn't call me anything," she said. "It knows me." In the weeks that followed, the station transformed. The hierarchical approach to interspecies communication that had defined Dominion research for centuries began to shift. New protocols emphasized presence over performance, connection over conquest of linguistic territory. Dr. Riva established a pioneering division focused on biochemical resonance patterns. working closely with Mara to document the subtle markers of recognition and trust across species boundaries. Ambassador Sophie, initially the most skeptical of Mara's approach, became an unexpected ally, advocating for the inclusion of non-verbal species in Dominion diplomatic initiatives. The Dusk Stalker, once the most feared specimen in the station's collection, became something of a celebrity. It accompanied Mara to research meetings, observation sessions, even recreational gatherings in the station's common areas. Staff who had once placed bets on how quickly it would kill her now marveled at its gentle interactions, its evident intelligence, and its unmistakable bond with the human xenolinguist. 3 months after that first breakthrough, Director Thelius called Mara to the administration level once more. This time, the director was not alone. Representatives from the Dominion's highest echelons filled the circular office, their diverse physiologies creating a living mosaic of interstellar cooperation. "Dr. Klein," said Thelius, mandibles clicking rapidly in what Mara now recognized as pride rather than amusement. "The High Council has reviewed the Vespera Initiative's findings. They have authorized an unprecedented proposal." Mara waited, feeling the stalker shift beside her, its scales rippling with color that reflected the emotional resonance in the room. The Dusk Stalker, and others of its kind, will be recognized as a sentient species under Dominion law, Thelius announced. Not as subjects for study, but as potential members of the interstellar community. A murmur ran through the assembled representatives. The implications were enormous. Never before had a species without technological development or conventional language systems been granted such status. Furthermore, Thelius continued, humanity's contribution to this paradigm shift has been acknowledged at the highest levels. Your species ranking has been permanently adjusted, with a special designation for intuitive empathic capabilities. Mara felt a swell of emotion, not pride in the advancement of human status, but vindication of what she had always believed, that connection transcended complexity, that understanding could exist beyond words. Later, as she and the stalker stood at the great observation window overlooking Vespera 4, Mara reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Below, the planet's surface glowed with the red light of its dwarf star, casting the vast wilderness in the same crimson hue as the simulation chamber where they had first truly met. The stalker pressed against her side, its massive body vibrating with that unique resonance that the station's instruments still couldn't fully capture. Mara placed her hand on its scales, feeling the connection that defied translation. No words had ever passed between them. No conventional communication. Yet they understood each other with a clarity that transcended language, not through domination or submission, but through mutual recognition of the other's complete being. In the reflection of the observation window, Mara could see curious onlookers watching from a respectful distance. Scientists, diplomats, security personnel. Their expressions ranged from wonder to lingering skepticism, but all were witnessing something revolutionary. Two species from vastly different evolutionary paths, connected not by technology or linguistic complexity, but by the simplest and most profound form of communication, presence. The stalker's 6 eyes met Mara's gaze in the reflection. In that silent exchange lay everything that needed to be said, and everything that words could never capture. As they turned from the window to walk the curved corridor back to their shared quarters, staff members stepped aside, watching the human and the apex predator move in perfect harmony. No barriers separated them. No technology mediated their connection. Just two beings who had found understanding in the space between words, in the silence where true communication begins.